Carnival will sell you a cruise for a price that makes you stop and blink. A full week at sea for what feels like a random discount glitch. And that's the part that messes with your brain. These are massive floating resorts. Fuel, food, staff, ports, entertainment, none of that is cheap. So the real question is why Carnival can charge so little up front and still run one of the biggest cruise machines on Earth. Today we're breaking down the real business tactics behind those low fares, how the cheap price is engineered, and what it means for your actual trip once you step on board. Let's start with just how cheap Carnival really is. How cheap is Carnival, really? Now, before we ever step on the ship, the first reality check is simple. Week-long Caribbean cruises do not price the same. December 2025, one major booking site listed a 7-night Eastern Caribbean on Carnival Celebration with an interior from $574 per person, about $82 per night, just to get on board. Now compare that to other lines. Royal Caribbean's week-long cruises show a 7-night Western Caribbean starting around $678 per person, roughly $97 per night. Norwegian listings show a 7-night Western Caribbean interior from $889, about $127 per night. So yes, Carnival can hit a price point that feels unreal. But Carnival isn't doing this because they're broke. In a 2025 quarter, they made about $6.3 billion total, and around 1/3 of that came from money spent after passengers board, not the ticket. They also carried about 3.4 million guests, with roughly $8.5 billion already sitting in deposits for future cruises. So the question isn't, how can they afford low fares? It's why they want the fare low in the first place. Carnival's cheap fare, an invitation. To really understand why Carnival's price can look so cheap, we have to understand one thing first. Carnival isn't treating the cruise ticket like the main product. They're treating it like the entry point. That low fare is designed to remove hesitation. It gets you to stop comparing too hard and start imagining yourself already on the ship. Because once you're on board, the business model shifts. A full ship doesn't just look lively, it makes everything else work. More upgrades, more activities, more add-ons, more spending without you feeling the total in the moment. So the cheap price isn't a discount. It's the start of a system. Now let's break down the first tactic behind it. Tactic 1. High volume, thin margin. First, stop thinking like a traveler and start thinking like an airline. Carnival is playing a volume game. A modern Carnival ship can carry thousands of guests, often 4,000 to 6,000 on the big ones. And if even half of those people pay a little more for anything beyond the basics, the ship starts printing money through sheer repetition. Now that's why the company cares so much about one metric above almost everything else. How full the ship is. Not perfectly priced, not premium, full. Because a ship that sails at 70% is basically leaving money on the pier. But a ship that sails packed? That's a moving city with constant transactions. Every extra passenger is another person who might upgrade a cabin, book an excursion, buy a photo, pay for faster internet, try a specialty restaurant, or spend in the casino. And none of those purchases require Carnival to build a whole new ship. The infrastructure is already there. So the base fare becomes a lever. If dropping the price fills 500 more beds, that can be worth far more than the money they lost on the ticket. Because those 500 people don't just exist, they spend. So you're getting a low entry price because you're joining a high volume machine. And the trade-off is obvious. More people, more competition for space, and a cruise that feels energetic, sometimes hectic, by design. Tactic 2. Pack the ship like a stadium. Carnival isn't building ships like quiet resorts. They build them like high-capacity venues. More like a stadium, a mall, and a theme park stacked on top of each other. Because every extra cabin they can fit onto a ship is another paying guest. And another guest doesn't just pay a fare. They eat, drink, shop, book things, and fill up the onboard economy. Here's the simplest way to picture it. If a ship carries 5,000 guests, that's 5,000 people making small decisions all day long. A coffee here, a photo there, a shore tour because we're already here. Multiply that by 7 days, and you're not talking about a few purchases. You're talking about a constant stream of money. That's why density matters. More people per sailing means Carnival can spread the big fixed costs, fuel, port fees, entertainment, and staff systems across more tickets. When costs are shared by a bigger crowd, the upfront fare can drop without the whole operation falling apart. But there's a trade. A ship designed for volume will feel like volume. The pool deck gets busy. Popular food spots spike at peak hours. Elevators become a mini sport. You didn't just buy a cruise. Sometimes you bought a cruise with rush hour included. And that's exactly how the fare stays low. Tactic 3. Paid off ships means discount freedom. New cruise ships are insanely expensive. Think hundreds of millions to over $1 billion depending on the class and the build. And when a line launches something brand new, they're not just selling vacations, they're trying to pay off a giant floating mortgage. Carnival has a different advantage. A lot of its fleet includes ships that are not brand new. Some are refreshed or updated or rebranded, but the important part is this. If the ship is already largely paid for, Carnival doesn't need every sailing to carry premium pricing just to cover massive financing costs. That gives them room to play offense with fares. They can take a sailing that's not filling fast, drop the price, and still make the numbers work, because the ship itself isn't bleeding them dry every month. A paid-down ship is like owning your car outright. You can charge less for rides because you're not making huge payments. Now, what does that mean for you? Sometimes it's a win. You get a lower fare and the ship still has everything you care about. Food, shows, pools, ports, and a solid cabin. Other times, the cheap comes with a more classic feel. Fewer headline attractions, fewer newest gen features, and more emphasis on simple fun instead of shiny new tech. Tactic 4. Cabin Tetris. Small rooms, more money. Carnival doesn't need your cabin to feel like a hotel suite. They need your cabin to be a piece of inventory that gets you onto the ship. Because the ship makes money when you're out of the room. Eating, watching shows, buying drinks, booking excursions, or playing in the casino. So the design logic becomes simple. Build more cabins, fit more guests, keep the ship full. That's why those cheapest cabins are often inside rooms and compact layouts. It's not an accident. It's cabin Tetris. If you can fit even 100 extra cabins onto a ship, that's potentially 200 to 300 extra guests per sailing, depending on how people share rooms. Now multiply that by the number of sailings per year, and you're talking about thousands more passengers without adding another ship. And every one of those guests is a chance for onboard spending. For you, this is where expectations matter. If you treat your cabin like a sleep station where you just shower, change, and knock out, then a smaller room can be the smartest trade in cruising. You saved money where you spend the least time. But if your idea of vacation is lounging in your room, spreading out, and having space to breathe, the cheap cabin can feel like you paid less and got less comfort. That's the deal. Carnival keeps the ticket low by selling you a room that's just enough to get you on board. A quick pause. If this breakdown is helping you cruise smarter, hit like and subscribe, because we post clear, practical cruise advice that saves you money and stress. But next, Carnival also needs a way to make money that doesn't depend on raising the ticket price. That's where Tactic 5 comes in. Tactic 5, the once you're in economy. This is the big one, because it explains why Carnival can afford to open the door so cheaply. Carnival isn't betting everything on the fare. They're betting on what happens after you arrive. Think of the ship as a small city where your key card is also your wallet. Every day, you walk past dozens of little spending decisions, some obvious, some sneaky, And the genius is that none of them feel like a big purchase. They feel like vacation. A $6 coffee, a $15 milkshake, or a $9 beer. A photo you didn't plan to buy. A paid restaurant because you want one nice night. An excursion because you didn't want to waste the port. Wi-Fi because you just need it for a little bit. Suddenly, you're not spending, you're treating yourself. Now put numbers on it. If a ship carries 5,000 guests and even half of them spend just $25 per day on extras, that's $62,500 a day in onboard revenue. Over a 7-night cruise, that's $437,500. And that's for moderate spenders only. Realistically, a chunk of guests spend way more than that, especially families and casino players. So the cheap fare isn't the finish line, it's a magnet. It gets more people on board, and more people on board turns the ship into a money-printing ecosystem. One small yes at a time. Tactic 6. Unbundle the fun, keep the fare pretty. Carnival keeps the headline fare low by doing something that looks harmless on a website. They separate the cruise into layers. Layer 1 is the yes layer, the part that's meant to look simple and irresistible. Cabin, basic meals, main entertainment, access to the ship. That's enough to feel like you're getting a whole vacation for a shockingly low price. But layer 2 is where the experience starts to expand and where the money starts to flow. Once you're on board, you'll notice how many things have a paid version right next to the included version. There's the free dining, and then the special night dining. There's the free sun deck, and then the quieter reserved spaces. There's the included activities, and then the ones that come with a charge, a package, or a timed slot. The trick is psychological. If the fare already felt like a steal, then every add-on feels smaller by comparison. It's only a little more, or we already saved on the cruise. This is our vacation. That's why unbundling works. It turns your spending into a series of tiny approvals instead of one big painful price up front. For you, the upside is choice. You can keep it simple and stay cheap. The downside is friction. If you don't decide what matters before you sail, the ship will decide for you, one upgrade at a time. But if the fare is the bait, the next tactic is how Carnival makes sure the hook actually sets. Tactic 7. Short cruises, more money cycles. Carnival doesn't just make money by sailing ships. They make money by turning ships over as often as possible. That's why they lean hard into 3, 4, and 5-night itineraries, especially out of major drive-to ports like Miami, Port Canaveral, Galveston, and New Orleans. When people can drive instead of fly, the trip feels cheaper and easier, so more people say yes on impulse. And short cruises create a powerful math trick. More sailings per year. A ship running mostly 7-night trips might do around 50-ish sailings a year depending on repositioning and dry dock schedules. But load that same ship with shorter itineraries, and you can push way more boarding days across the calendar. More resets, more new passengers, more fresh wallets. It also changes the crowd. Now, short cruises tend to attract first-timers, groups, celebrations, and people who want maximum fun in minimum time. That energy is great for Carnival's business model because shorter trips usually mean people spend faster. They don't think, I have 7 days to decide. They think, it's only 4 days. Let's do it. For you, that's the trade. If you want a quick, high-energy escape, short Carnival sailings can feel like a floating weekend festival. If you want slower, calmer, and more space, those short itineraries can feel louder, busier, and more party-forward than you expected. Tactic 8. Standardization, the hidden cost cutter. Carnival doesn't reinvent the wheel on every ship. They standardize a lot of experience on purpose because repetition is cheaper than creativity. When ships share similar layouts, similar kitchen systems, similar menus, similar entertainment formats, and similar staffing training, the line saves money in ways most passengers never notice. Fewer unique parts, means fewer unique problems. Fewer unique problems means faster training, smoother operations, and fewer costly mistakes. Even supplies get easier. If you can stock the same types of ingredients, the same bar setups, and the same core inventory across multiple ships, you can buy in bulk and control waste better. That's a quiet advantage at Carnival scale, because small savings per guest become huge savings across millions of passengers. And here's the real payoff. Standardization lets them run the ships more efficiently, which gives them more flexibility to discount the fares when they need to fill the cabins. Now for you, the upside is predictability. If you've sailed Carnival before, the next ship will feel familiar. You already know how the day flows, or how the dining works, what the vibe is, and how to find your way around. The downside is sameness. If you want each trip to feel wildly different, Carnival can feel more like a consistent product than a unique once-in-a-lifetime experience. But that consistency is part of the reason the price stays low. Tactic 9. Good enough service at scale. Luxury service is expensive because it's labor, more staff, more time per guest, and more personal attention. Carnival plays a different game. They aim for service that's fast, friendly, and functional across thousands of people, because scaling perfect service to a full ship would explode costs. So instead of staffing like a boutique hotel, they staff like a high-volume resort. Systems matter more than personalization. The goal is keeping the operation moving, cabins turned, dining rooms flipped, lines managed, problems solved quickly. Now for you, this creates a mixed reality. You can meet crew members who feel like superstars, warm, sharp, unforgettable. But you can also feel the pressure of a busy ship, especially at peak times, where service becomes about speed and flow more than small touches. That's not a bad cruise, it's a cheaper one. And this is one of the quiet trades Carnival makes to keep fares low. Tactic 10. The price trains you. To really understand why Carnival stays so cheap, you have to zoom out beyond a single sailing. Carnival isn't only trying to sell you this trip. They're trying to shape your future decisions. Because once you've seen a Carnival fare that looks unbelievably low, it sets a mental anchor. Every other cruise price you see after that gets judged against the first number that shocked you. And that's powerful, because it turns Carnival into your default option. You don't even have to love every detail of the ship for the strategy to work. You just have to feel like you got away with something. And that feeling is addictive. It makes you proud of the booking, not just excited for the vacation. You start telling your friends, "You won't believe what I paid." You start checking Carnival first, and you start scanning for the next deal like it's a game. And here's the part most people miss. When a company becomes your first click, they don't have to fight as hard for your next purchase. They've already won the top spot in your mind. That's why they can keep throwing out low fares. They're buying loyalty with shock value. So the cheap ticket is not the end of the business model. It's how the model keeps feeding itself. What this means for your experience. When you put all of that together, here's what those cheap fares usually mean in real life. On the good side, you can get on the ship for a surprisingly low price, which makes cruising feel accessible even if you're on a tight budget. And Carnival's vibe is lively by design. So if you're traveling with friends, family, or a group that wants energy, it can feel like the ship is always doing something. It's also a strong first cruise option because it gets the full cruise experience without paying premium line prices. But there's a trade. More value usually means more people, so crowds, lines, and noise are part of the package, especially at peak hours. You'll also feel constant little temptations to upgrade or add something on, which can mess with your budget if you're not paying attention. And the overall quality, food and service especially, tends to land in the good for the price zone more than the wow, this is luxury zone. And that's the key point. Carnival can be an amazing deal, but only if you're the one controlling the final cost, not the ship. How to hack Carnival's cheap business model. If you want to actually win with Carnival's low pricing, You need to treat it like a system you can control. First, book off-peak when possible. Shoulder seasons and less popular weeks are where Carnival tends to drop fares the hardest, and the ship often feels a little less packed too. Second, set an extras budget before you board. Decide what you're willing to spend on the big temptations: drinks, Wi-Fi, casinos, excursions, and stick to that number like it's part of the ticket. Third, watch out for impulse spending. Photos, onboard shops, and random pay-per-use stuff is designed to feel small in the moment, then shock you at the end. Fourth, lean on what's included. Use the buffet and main dining room as your default, then choose one premium splurge night if you want that special feel without turning it into a habit. And finally, don't assume cheap means bad. Just know exactly what you're trading for that low fare. If this helped you understand why Carnival looks so cheap, hit like and subscribe for more cruise advice that keeps you safe, calm, and in control of your budget. And watch the next video on your screen right now. Remember, your voyage is just beginning.